We have 6 research centers, and out of these 6 research centers, 2 are in my department. One is the Aquatic Ecology Center, and another is Himalayan Cryosphere Research Center, which looks largely on the Himalayan issue, glacial issues. And we have about 10% international students, not exactly in my department, but we have a lot of students in medical sciences and some specific programs. Those programs where international students have a big interest, for example, in ethnomusic or Buddhist studies. We have a very strong Buddhist studies program and some other programs. So in some programs, there is a good flow of the international students also, not more in science and engineering programs. We are relatively less number of the students. So, and this is the web page. Anybody who will be interested to look at some details of our university, you can go through that. Now, coming to where Nepal is, many of you might be knowing it, but just to explain, as you see, this is the China, and this is India, and you can see major river system of that region based on the Himalayan. This is the Himalayan range. This is Indus system, then the Ganges, then there is Mekong, right? And Nepal is basically somewhere here, right? So Himalayas all the way along over here, and most of the Nepalese geographical characteristics depends upon the mountains, which are plate tectonics, based on the plate tectonics, and then the alluvial plain because of these rivers that are carrying sediments. And within this system, in fact, almost 1/3 of the whole human population. So these river systems are supporting that level of the human population. And within here, we have Nepal. This is the country, China and India, and Kathmandu is the capital. Kathmandu is the capital, and our university is located a little bit up here toward the east, 30 kilometers. Well, I will be I'm living, in fact, largely in campus itself. We have facilities for the faculties as well as for the students over there. Now, coming to the topic, we all are familiar what is environmental health, right? All the aspects of the human health, not only the personal, but what surrounds to us as per the basic definition. Now, if you look at the recent information on the health, how it is being affected. In Nepal's concept, there are a number of environmental issues which we need to address, because a lot of environmental concerns are there, a lot of air pollution, a lot of water pollution. We have also problem on the food, particularly from the pesticides in agriculture. There are the issues of the vector-borne diseases. Is we have a high altitudinal gradients from 50 meters above sea level to the Mount Everest, more than 8,000 meters. So we have a variety of the climatic zones, and in many of the climatic zones in the lower areas, we have a lot of vector-borne diseases. Waste disposal, and we are quite sensitive because of the fragility of our ecosystems due to climate change. So a lot variety of these different issues are there, and today I'll be more focusing on I'll start with the air, because now this is coming up as one of the major health risks in our region, not only in Nepal but whole in South Asia. The reason behind is South Asia is the region where still huge amount of the biomass is being used for cooking purposes, and not only the timber and firewood, but also the agricultural waste, right? And the firing systems are not very efficient, so a lot of pollutants, fine particulates are being emitted. Then a huge amount of the coal, both in India and China, are being used. So it's not only what we emit within Nepal or a particular city of Nepal, but also we get a huge amount of the pollutants from these adjoining areas. So that will also, I'll be a little bit talking. So I'm more focusing on air, followed by water, and then I'll talk a little bit on the climate change issue. So if you look at the Environment Performance Index of UNEP, Nepal is ranked 149 out of 180 countries in overall environmental issues. So as a developing countries, all developing countries have quite a lot of environmental issues, and Nepal is also having the same, and on that we are not performing that well. And in relation to the air quality issue, we are 177th. Only a very few countries are a little bit worse than us. And what you see here, what you see here is all we are together. So if you put Bangladesh, China, India, all are our neighbors, right? So it's more or less same. Just ranking in some places when you are monitoring, depending on the monitoring station, little bit ups and down, but having the similar level of these pollutants in our case. Now, if you go further, this is a very recent publication from Lancet. They have a commissioned report, and they ranked Nepal. This was just last fortnights back. It is being produced and which is available in the Lancet webpage. Nepal is ranked 6th in relation to the air pollution and mortality rate among the different countries where air pollution effects are so high. And if you look at that, the global scenario they have made is there are 9 million deaths linked to pollution. And almost all are in low and middle income countries. And you can imagine we are being in the worst position. The worst effect we are facing. And out of these pollution-related deaths, COPD, heart diseases, stroke, lung cancer, 2/3 is because of the air pollution. And now it is also already being established that it's not only the lung diseases or the respiratory diseases, air pollution making effect. It has a strong correlationship. The final ultimate effect of the air pollution are the cardiovascular diseases. All right. So if you make a proportion, a huge proportion of the cardiovascular diseases is because of the air pollution. Now, coming to this data from Lancet, 92% of the premature deaths are in low-income countries. So most of these deaths are among those countries. Then air pollution, both indoor and outdoor, account for 6.5 million deaths out of that 9 million around. And water comes down to 1.8 million. We all are aware that till few years back, maybe a decade or so, water pollution was the major issue for child death, child mortality because of the diarrheal diseases and other diseases, right, related to water contamination. It may be pathogenic, it may be vector-borne, and so many things. But a huge campaign was being done for improving the situation, and it has made some impact to many of the developing countries, like even in Nepal also. So the trend is decreasing. But air pollution is a new phenomenon now causing a bigger public health impact, particularly in the developing countries. And very little what is being studied or worked in our developing countries is about the workplace pollution and occupational health issues. And they estimate that around 800,000 deaths among all the deaths are associated with that out of that 9 point something million deaths. Now, having said that, this is from Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves. If you look at in Nepal, for all age deaths in 1990, if you look at this, childhood undernutrition, it is been going down. So within this 25 years, there is a lot of improvement in the nutritional aspect. A lot of campaigns, a lot of efforts government and other non-governmental organization has done. In the second line, what you see here is unsafe water, household air pollution, unsafe sanitation, ambient particulate matter, and no hand washing with soap. There are a number of things related with water and air. What you see is unsafe water, unsafe sanitation, no hand washing soap. They all are going down by 2015. What are more or less stagnant or going up is air pollution and particulate matter pollution, either inside the house or outside the house. And we all know, inside the house pollution also goes outside, and outside the ambient pollution also goes to inside. So they have their combined effect, right? And if you look at the disease characteristics over here, what are going up? The smoking habit is increasing. It's not only the active but passive smoking also, right? You can see high systolic blood pressure is increasing. High fasting plasma glucose level is increasing. So kind of metabolic diseases is increasing. Lifestyle related diseases are increasing, and air pollution related diseases are increasing. What you see which were not in the ranking, total cholesterol is increasing. Diet low in whole grains are increasing. So we are changing our lifestyle, pollution level are increasing, and so the overall disease pattern is increasing in whole developing countries. All right? It is gradually shifting more and more from water-related, pathogen-related disease to lifestyle-related disease. You want to make a question?
Yeah. What is high fasting plasma glucose?
Oh, it's the level of the glucose in the plasma, which we medically call as diabetes, right? Because you cannot process the glucose in the blood. Okay. So the situation is changing, and air pollution is coming up as one of the major concerns. Globally, I will not talk only in Nepal, but in that whole area. If you have just read the newspapers, in Delhi, the capital of India, they have banned the vehicles. They have alternative number, this registration number, they have reduced down because the level of the PM 2.5 has gone so high that they want to reduce the vehicle flying in the streets. And in the winter, it is so severe. And I'll have some tables on that later on. So, 2016, if you look at WHO estimates, household air pollution and ambient air pollution deaths in Kathmandu, this is for Nepal, is almost 30,000, right? Well, more than 30,000. And if you look at the global burden of disease, the top 3 causes of death in Nepal in 2015 in 100,000, cardiovascular diseases, diarrhea, lower respiratory and other common infectious diseases, and the chronic respiratory diseases. These are the most prevalent cause of the death in Nepal. I mentioned earlier that the water-related things are going down, but they are still quite prevalent. I do not mean here that they are completely gone. Proportionately now, the contribution of the air pollution-related diseases are going up, but water-related diseases are still existing in large extent, so that we should not forget. And so, the air pollution is the #1 risk factor causing deaths and disabilities in Nepal. And here, both ambient, in the urban areas, it's largely the ambient air pollution. And in the rural areas, where we do not talk much, is the indoor air pollution, where biomass is the major source of cooking. The ventilation system are not that excellent, right? And the stoves are not very efficient. And the women who are working over there are being most affected. The children who live around and the elderly. So the most vulnerable group who could be affected more are there being affected by the indoor air pollution. Now, what are the level of the pollution in Kathmandu? The examples are from Kathmandu. PM 2.5, which we measure nowadays most, these are the the data are based on Nepali calendar. What you see here is, this is from June going down to October. This is the reason. This is the monsoon time, right? Which brings down the level of the pollutants quite low. And when after October, when it starts, it goes up, and you can see. And the WHO standard is 25 milligram per meter cube. And you can see what is the extent of the level. This is the diurnal pattern. And if you look at the diurnal pattern, what I find is, very early in the morning, the PM 2.5 level is very, very high. It's not only because we start cooking very early. It's because Kathmandu is a valley, and thus there is a lot of inversion may take place during winter that traps the pollutants for a longer duration and leading to high level of the exposure, continuous exposure. In fact, I was discussing with Steve that your valley here, Salt Lake Valley and Kathmandu Valley, is more or less of similar origin. They used to be lakes earlier, all right? And I was asking what is the population, right? Kathmandu has almost, if you count the floating population, it's about 5 million, all right? And he said me that here the population is around 1 million or so. Salt Lake Valley, all right? So you see the number of the people, number of the activities they do, it's all rust everywhere, and that leads to very high level of the pollution. So because of the inversion here, and there were sometimes advisory that, okay, you don't do jogging in the morning hours, right? Particularly winter, it's not advised in Kathmandu. Now, coming to household pollution, as I explained, it is one of the serious problems, particularly in the rural areas. 2/3 of the household in Nepal use solid fuels. Of course, there is a very increasing trend of using gas, but the rate of use of gas is still not matching with the rate of the population growth. And that's why the proportion of the population using biomass is still quite high. Now, coming to the different sources, this is old information, 2006. Now, if you look at the recent information, these are the different common sources, major sources of the air pollution in Kathmandu. Motor vehicles makes the major number one. Then soil dust. What you have to realize here is the resuspension of the dust. Because of the road conditions are not good, the vehicles not only emitting the pollutants, but also when they are moving, they are resuspending the dust in the road. And so that further enhance. So contribution of motor vehicle, this and here also there is a substantial contribution of the motor vehicle. And garbage burning and biomass burning, industries, particularly brick and some other sources. These are some of the common sources. And recently, one of the worrisome thing, what was being realized is a good proportion of the pollutants are coming in Kathmandu Valley, and not only in Kathmandu Valley, but all this Himalayan range from the southern plain. Not only from the southern plain, but also some from Tibet, some from the Mediterranean region also. And their proportion is gradually increasing. So if you look at some of these examples, like this is kind of level of the vehicle pollution. I'll quickly go. This is open burning somewhere in Kathmandu. This is the same. And why Kathmandu, this open burning has a major concern, particularly the waste burning, is if you look at the emission factor, particularly releasing the PM 2.5, their contribution is the highest one. Open burning of garbage is the most potent source, right? So that's why it is coming up as one of the main risk factor regarding the health of the population. Then these are the brick lanes. What you see here is within such small areas, 1, 2, 3, 4 lanes, you can notice. I taught some of the students and showing them what are the different types of the canes earlier. So these are a seasonal industry. And what you see is, like in this diagram, maybe there are some students may like to answer what happened on 4th January 2014, where in our concern is why this is so high over there. As I said, it's a seasonal industry, brick industry. During the monsoon time, the industry are closed and they start somewhere December, January, and the brick industry started and the emission level also increases like that, right? So they make a big contribution, particularly during winter season and in the dry season afterwards. This is the valley, Kathmandu Valley, You can see this is the airport and different locations. You notice a haze coming from south, right? So this is south, part of it is Nepal's plain area, then further is India, and this is the route of the pollutants coming up to Kathmandu Valley, right? And in fact, in the afternoon, looking at the wind pattern, they move further towards the east. So my place, which is a little bit better, is also affected by what happens in Kathmandu. Mahabharat is the range of the mountains, after which there is Tarai. Tarai is the lowlands of Nepal, and this is the part of the Indo-Gangetic plain, and this Indian part is the part of the Indo-Gangetic plain. So what you see, the haze is coming towards the north, right? And there is since last decade or bit more, there is a trend that during winter in the Tarai regions, permanent haze throughout the day remains in the air, right? Making the atmosphere too cool, and people will suffer from a lot of diseases. Pollutants remain there for a longer duration, right? And so the negative effect, additional negative effect of that is when there is a haze, and this is basically the black carbon, because the agricultural products, dung, and the biomass being burned. And the additional product is, the effect is when the solar radiation is coming, right? It does not penetrate down, it is being reflected back, and that goes to the Himalayan region. So the temperature on the higher altitudes towards the north will increase, but in the lower altitudes where temperatures are relatively higher, will remain low. So completely negative effect, and that has a climate change implications also. And you imagine on that, not only the biomass burning, I mentioned about the number of the kilns in Kathmandu, only 110, in Nepal around 1,000, and if you count whole these Indian areas, more than 100,000 kilns, and many more other industries, all that pollution may come to Kathmandu or Nepal for that matter. In fact, to the whole Himalayan region. So what you see here is, this is the haze coming up from whole of these Indo-Gangetic plains and extending to the Himalayan region, right? And that has an impact. The dust particles, when they come to the snow, they help melt the snow faster, right? Glacial effects will also be there, and the temperature will remain higher in those areas. Naturally, it has multiple implications. So over there is Mount Everest, and you can see the level of the haze going up towards the north. So in the whole region, not only the local emissions, what is being emitted from the adjoining areas are of significant importance to look at. So we have to look at it in a regional perspective, how we are going to reduce down the emission levels so that its health implications could be reduced. Okay. Now that was about what is the situation or scenario related to air pollution and health. I will a little bit talk on the water sanitation and hygiene also. As I mentioned, there was a lot of efforts on wash activities, and because of that there is some improvement. But the effectiveness of that wash activity is not as it is being expected. So in some cases, still some increasing trend, even with the water-related things, are there. If you look at the figure globally, there are 12.4% of the mortality attributed to exposure to unsafe water, sanitation and hygiene, and in our region it goes more than 20%. And what has been found, and particularly in case of Nepal, is, in fact, very recently one of our PhD graduate is working on this. Drinking water is still highly contaminated, particularly at the point of use. So you might make a supply of water, which is okay, but your storage or your handling of water is one of the main cause of increasing contamination in drinking water, right? So, how the behavioral part of the population who are handling it, right, is the most important thing to reduce down the water quality related issue. And we are having highly contaminated thermotolerant coliforms, total or E. coli, and particularly in the point of use, right? You might have a good supply system, you might have a good storage system, but when you are handling it, if you are not doing it in a better way, naturally it will not have much. This is the improvement in the sanitation coverage. When I say sanitation coverage, it's basically about the coverage of the toilets in the households and like that. We have achieved more or less the Millennium Development Goal and the Sustainable Development Goal. And if you look at the recent data, we are almost having 83% coverage for the water supply and sanitation. But the quality of that is the problem, or the operational and maintenance part of that, which further has deteriorated because it's not being properly operated and maintained, right? And because of that, this is a little bit older, after 2013. If you see, there is a increasing trend of the diarrheal incidence for under 5 children. Then 2014 and 15, as you see, coverage has been improved, and as the recent information is almost 83-84% for both. Problem is, as I indicated earlier, they are not functional. Only 25% are functional, right? And because of that, diarrheal incidences are still not lowering down. That's the problem, right? And the household water treatment practices are not also very efficient. So largely, the system, the physical system, infrastructure for better water supply, what has been improved, many of them need improvements in the operational level, and the behavioral part at the end is one of the concern, particularly related to water related health issues. And what you see here, under 5 children diarrheal incidence rate is increasing, and then but the deaths are decreasing. The point here is the distribution of the disease in the different location is gradually changing. It's in one particular place it is decreasing, but it is spreading out, right? So more number of people are being affected, and one of the reasons for that is the presence of, or the increase, or because we have a altitudinal gradients very sharp. So with the increased climatic changes, increased temperature changes, the area where the diarrheal incidence rate increase will also, the area will also increase. This is another issue. This is about arsenic. We do not have industrial arsenic poisoning, but we have naturally occurring arsenic pollution in our groundwater, particularly in our Tarai. There are some reports even in Kathmandu in some of the locations, but in most places in Tarai, there is arsenic of geological origin. And the whole Tarai and the Indo-Gangetic plain is being made of the alluvial deposit, which has come along with the rivers from the Himalayan region. So not only Nepal's Tarai, but India and Bangladesh, all are the arsenic-prone areas, right? And till 2 decades or so, we were not much aware of the arsenic. Then we started to explore of the level of the arsenic, and what you see here is and there the tube wells are being used for drinking, and a large number of the tube wells are being contaminated. And arsenicosis, which has this skin problem, you can see they are having a lot of these problems. Now, what people have done is, people have identified the arsenic contaminated tube wells, marked them, and asked the people to use those which are not. The WHO guideline is about 10 ppb, and the national guideline is around 50 ppb. So we allow people to use those tube wells which are having 50 ppb also. But if people will be, because they are using it for longer duration, many of them have developed this kind of the skin problems. So that's briefly on the water quality. Now, the climate change, that has also its impact on the health. Of course, it is also related with air pollution as well as the water pollution to some extent. And Nepal is ranked number 4th as a most vulnerable country as in the climate change risk atlas, and that is basically its fragility of the geographical characteristics and the reliance on the economy on the climate sensitive sectors, and of course our capacity to deal with technically with the climatic uncertainties. These are some of the disease conditions which may have implications. There are not specific studies done in relation to climate change and how much has the impact, but these are some of the areas we have identified which may have implications. So one is the vector-borne diseases. We have a lot of vector-borne diseases, particularly in the lowlands, because of the temperature regime over there, malaria and other kind of the vector-borne diseases. As the temperature increase towards the higher altitudes, the vectors are also, their distribution is also goes towards the high altitude. So new areas are being formed or occupied by these vectors, and new group of the people can be affected. Then, of course, because of these epidemics of the diarrheal diseases and cholera, because these microbials, as I mentioned earlier, and more thermophilic kind of the bacteria are prevalent, and then different foodborne diseases, malnutrition, because it has implications to the production. Areas with increased temperature have implications to agricultural productions, as it is related to the air pollution also. With the increased air pollution, the temperature increase, it has implications to the cardiorespiratory diseases. It has also implications to physiological stresses, and of course, extreme weather-related health effects also. In our case, when I say extreme weather, it's the flood events or the landslides, things like that, which every year cause a large number of the deaths and disabilities in Nepal. So if you took at the number, the estimates is around from 100,000, around 95.6 deaths every year is because of the disaster. This is because of the earthquake, it's not the regular one. 2015, we have had a big earthquake, and more than 8,000 people died. Almost 500,000 houses are being destroyed, right? And this is one example, but these numbers are for those which are because of this regular kind of the disasters that occur, particularly during monsoon period when there is flood and landslide. Okay, now that was the general health scenario. In my university, we have started some courses on environmental health. In fact, we started it with support from the Fulbrighter. Earlier, from Professor Bill Carter from the University of Findlay, and followed by Dr. Steve from here, right? We started, and of course we had a Ford Foundation chair professorship. We had a chair professor from India, and that all led to the development of the curriculum for a course on environmental health and occupational health. And now we have introduced that. We have completed one PhD, it is being done. We have course on the environmental engineering program, master's level, environmental science program, and in the undergraduate program. So these are the courses we teach in our university in relation to environment and health, which includes both environmental and occupational health, of course. And that's the last slide, and this is the location of my university. University is somewhere here. This is one of our medical campus, basic science campus. And this is my email ID, and if you like to communicate or anything related to my university or the work we are doing, then I can have further communications. I think I did not take much of your time, and I was in time also. We have still 15 minutes or so, 10 minutes. If you have questions, I'll be happy. Yes, please.
So I was wondering, I apologize seeing it implicate the snowpack at all in creating polluted meltwater?
Say it again.
Oh, sorry. So like, are you seeing the pollution get into like the rain and the snow and melt water or river runoff that's even worse, even more polluted
Yes.
because of the air?
Yeah, yeah. Now, what happens is when the black carbons are there in the air and they are being transported, right? So, when the black carbons strikes the snow, that enhances the melting. So that enhances like the retreat of the glaciers because more snow will be melted, and also snow holding will not be there. So one of the problem of the air pollution now in our context is the glacial retreats, right? So the permanent snow cover is gradually decreasing, and this snow are the source of water for all those rivers which I mentioned earlier. So that has a long hydrological implications. So that is this climatic and the general part. And in relation to health, now these black carbons, which are unburned hydrocarbons, right? Because we are using mostly this biomass. So depending upon what hydrocarbon is being burned, we are burning any kind of hydrocarbons. So we will have effects accordingly, right? So the people who are not being exposed to that earlier in the high altitudes, they are being exposed. And that is the main problem over there. Okay? Yes.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned about the arsenic in the water.
Yes.
So if the water is contaminated, how they use? What they
Okay, yes. Now, as I mentioned, our arsenic is geological in nature as it comes down with the alluvial deposits, right? So in the same location, it depends upon from which aquifer we are abstracting the water. It may be possible that in very close another well, another tube well may not have arsenic. So you have to cross check that. That is one way. So what they are doing is they are finding out how many wells are having arsenic above at least 50 ppb and marking them and suggesting the population not to use that. But there are some filters also being introduced with some iron nails and things like that, which also helps not only to reduce down the microbial contamination, but also the arsenic it will capture. They use some nails in which there is some reaction. I do not know the exact details of that, but that's also being introduced, right? So that's the way they are trying to handle. Yeah, sir.
I was struck by the importance of the resuspension of dust as vehicles travel across the roads. And I wonder, could you tell us a little bit more about the nature of the roads, what improvements are needed, and how that varies in urban versus rural areas?
Okay. In fact, in most of the urban areas, we are having the paved roads, but these paved roads are not being maintained properly. And that's why they are broken. In the rural areas, it may be only the clear roads, earthen roads only, right? So naturally, there is a very high resuspension. But in many of the urban areas, because of the limited maintenance, and they are being broken, so they also exhibit a good amount of the resuspension of the soil, all right, dust particle. And what happens is, because we have this monsoon, and many of our highways are like along the rivers, right? And when there is flooding, they bridge the roads, and then roads are being broken. So we need to have a big continuous effort to maintain the road, right? And if that we cannot do properly, naturally the road conditions are not being very good, will not remain very good. And that is what is the situation. So in general, the highways and the urban areas are largely having the paved one, but needs strong maintenance over there, right? Otherwise they contribute for the resuspension, and that's what is happening. In the rural areas, in most cases, of course, they are the earthen roads, and naturally resuspension is a problem over there. Yes, any more? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, one more.
Yeah, please.
So
That's right, yeah.
So, have they found that there's any difference between, children, boys or girls that are sent to school so they're not at home during the day? Or is it just as bad in the schools
Okay.
if they're burning the fuel?
The situation of sending is school is changing. The social level, understanding level is changing. It's now more and more girls are going, right? I'll not say that everywhere, everybody is going, but the situation is highly improving. So that way, when I say children, it's both boy and girl, right? It is largely because of the economic conditions if they do not go to the school. Now, the small children who do not go to the school, the age below, right, they remain there for longer duration, playing with the mother and like that. They have a common kitchen, the bedroom may be also there, the ventilation may not be good, stoves are open, and so there is a big risk. So because they remain there, and the elderly, who are also not going much outside. Yeah.
Any other questions? Let's give Dr. Khanal one last.